The last video on, now you know the rest of the story, without Paul Harvey, was an overview of some of the content we're going to share with you. Today we're going to look at coincidences, going back to safety and environmental issues that we've identified in the past, moving forward, which helped create the field service management system where we're at with the lawsuits today, how we ended up in the lawsuit with the PMO, why we're looking at doing class action suits. And I've been asked by a few people now over and over again, who exactly are we suing? Well, technically, we're not suing. We're hoping not to sue anybody. It doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means that we're trying to take our advantage, our intellectual property, use that as a benefit for the industry as a whole, by going back to the services that are being extorted and say, look, we have no real safety. We've tried to offer real safety to the oil and gas industry. The oil and gas industry's rejected it, to the point where we've taken it to the PMO's office, and we're going to explain a little bit how it got to the PMO's office. The PMO itself has rejected it. That rejection, unfortunately, through the communication, would allow an opportunity where the PMO must have felt that there was some embarrassment that could have come its way, come the way of the Prime Minister. So the PMO, under our contention, armored the CRA or Revenue Canada to come after us, as we briefly touched on last time. When that happened, we looked into the revelations of the complaint, and again, because I don't do my own books or my own accounting, I hire services for that. I have professionals that it's their job to go over and earn their keep, right? So, and they look at it and they said, well, no, that didn't happen because we were the first line of defense. We're the first one that gets a phone call. You sign away that right to us that we can negotiate on your behalf. And if they don't come back to us, then it didn't happen. So they want to come back 4 years later and say, no, we did this. Well, that's it's a little mysterious because we pull those records as they go along. So you can say, well, that didn't exist. Now it exists. So then we went to I went to my MP, like I said, and asked my MP for a little assistance. It gave us an opportunity to start dumping information into them about what we're doing with the safety programs and what's going on. At the same time, we have to look at what's going to be the relationship between what we're doing with the oil and gas industry, what we're trying to accomplish. In the beginning, the idea simply was to let us help you fix our program, right? The program itself, operating with features and benefits, and operating with the cooperation amongst the industries for real safety and real environmental protection, was more important to us than trying to even get back our own, any capital gains that we could obtain by it. The industry being the industry, I mean, you're dealing with a lot of arrogance. A lot of people that really they believe they wouldn't have understood it when it was sent to them. As some of my field people have come back and told me, they said, well, the problem, Tim, is that they don't get it. And the people that are supposed to explain it to them, those are the people that this affects the most, right? This limits their powers. So, we're going to get into how these things happened over a little bit of time. But we're going to go back to a conversation back in early 2018, but we'll start 2017. 2017, I noticed that there was a worrying trend where, as the industry goes through slowdowns and peaks and valleys, as we go through these long-term valleys that we've had recently, we lose a lot of, we lose the equipment assets, we lose the brain trust, right? So there goes the experience goes out the door. A lot of people, they start, they age out, like myself. We get to the point where if you're not active all the time, you start to do things like gain weight and get out of shape and do stupid things. So you start to lose your experience. So when you start to lose your experience, you try to replace it with a younger generation. So the idea is like in education, where you think you can have one educator teach 20 or 30 students at a time. The problem with that is that educator, I should have turned off Messenger. That educator, the education he's going to give is based on his experience. If his experience, he doesn't have a lot of experience, then he's going to use a lot of boistering to try to boost himself. So we're going to end up with individuals in our industry. We end up with individuals that come out and they might have the theory down of how something will work, but it doesn't actually work that way. That's the way we're told it works. It's like safety. We're told if we just do this and fill out this form, we're all safe. We know we're not safe. Right? I mean, there's nobody around. But if you want to move up in your job, right, you're gonna do as you're told, right? I mean, our world has become one of let's go along to get along, right? Let's not rock the boat, right? We call it abdicating and obfuscating, right? Is what the actual terms for it is. Abdicating, if you're in a semi-position of power and the people above you are in a position of power and they say do this, you might say, well, that's not really the rules, but you're going to do it anyhow. I mean, we referred to an article back in 2018, October 4th, 2018, to a letter to the officers and directors of the oil and gas companies, all 637 of the major ones. We said to them, look, read this article. I mean, this article, it was based on actual on how the bureaucracy itself, dictates and determines 90% of the statutes of the law. Then at the same time, there's an example came out that our Prime Minister Trudeau, Crime Minister, what most of you might call him now, Trudeau came out and he said, look, he was talking about the long gun registry, the long gun registry that he would like to reenact. And he described it accurately that anybody could go and buy a long gun or a shotgun, or as long as they're not a specified weapon, they can go ahead and buy one. You didn't have to show show a firearms acquisition certificate. So they went, well, the media jumped all over him, said, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, the problem was that the bureaucracy in the RCMP had decided to say that they had rewritten the law for themselves, and they posted it on their website. So when you look at law, the RCMP tried to direct you to their website. Reason B, that they can now dictate the law. So it doesn't matter how it was legislated. It's how the powers that be want it to be legislated, wanted it to be. So it wasn't that way. So what the RCMP had done is they had posted down that everybody had to show, record, and maintain records of everybody else that you sold or transferred a firearm to. That actually, in fact, wasn't true when it comes to long guns and shotguns. Now that touched off on something that happened with our family when my stepfather died back in 2006. He was a well-known hunter and guide outfitter, and the police showed up at the door shortly after his death, and they wanted all his guns. And Mom said, "Well, I don't know where his guns are." He got rid of his guns, which he did. He got rid of them before he expired, before he passed on. So the police threatened her, and they told her that she had, it wasn't local police, but they threatened her that they wanted those guns, and if she didn't produce those guns, or list of where those guns are, that they would come back and they would charge her. And she phoned me up all upset, and I phoned the police, and I said, "Try that again." I said, "I dare you, try it again." They didn't come back. It was probably wise. That was an absolutely stupid thing to do on their behalf. They knew that the law, that was outside the law, but they did it anyhow. They didn't care. And I see the whole point is, if they can get away with it, but to the RCMP officer, when I talked to him, he says, "Well, that's the law." And I said, "No, it's not the law." I said, "Read the law." "Well, I do. I have it right here." He has it in his RCMP handbook. I said, "But that's the law according to the RCMP. That's the bureaucratic law." So again, when we're looking at things in life, you're looking at the bureaucracy actually dictates or determines most of the law. So the politicians that, or the legislatures that create the law, we end up not always being serviced by the law. And if you don't know the law yourself, it's like everybody has to be a lawyer. So we're going to go past that a little bit for now. We're going to get on to something that's more relevant with what we're doing here today. Yesterday, my service called me and they said, "Tim, you have a letter here from a lawyer, and it's about your bank account and blah, blah, blah." I said, "Okay, very good." Right. So we're going to get into what the letter is and what it's about. So back in 2017, when we decided, okay, we're going to build the real-time pressure testing monitoring system, regulatory compliance monitoring system. We're going to create a system that's so cheap versus the system we've done in the past, with cost a little bit more with plug-and-play technology. Now the technology has grown to the point where the industry itself has most of the technology available, the communication ability available, so we can make it real time, make it very cheap. So we come up with a system, right? That was, we engineered a system that was very easy to adapt. It was adaptable to everybody. It cost about $1,000 a truck to adapt it. It wasn't a big deal. They could spend more, they could spend less. Didn't matter. When we did our truck, because the truck we did, we decided that we wanted to make it so we could discuss it and show people in different areas. So we created a hydraulic over electric unit where we could have multiple multiple operating stations, in and around the truck, so we could show it at different angles. But they didn't have to go to that extent. It was just a simple T and a valve and a chunk of hose, basically. So the industry, we go to the industry. We're at a safety meeting in December of 2017. It's for Birchcliff Energy. And Birchcliff's safety guys are there. They had some guys from Comply Works there, and they're going over their raw stuff. And they just so happened to mention in this meeting that they were going to start limiting pay. If you weren't compliant on their network, that you would no longer get paid, or you wouldn't get paid no matter how much work how much they owed you for. This goes back to what we talked earlier about another article we're going to reference, where there's another extortion that's been going on historically for a long time. This just tied the two extortions together: the extortion over payment and the extortion over your safety compliance. So before we got into that, so we're looking at the ultimate in safety itself is where the blow-up preventer. So if you don't know what a blow-up preventer is, you can Google it, or one of the best things to do it. Go watch Deep Ocean's Horizon. It's a little bit fictionalized, but it's a pretty good explanation of exactly what happens if they don't work. People die, things blow up, you end up with environmental disasters. But that's based on the BOP, or blow-up preventer, didn't work in that respect. The reasons being whatever they might be. The cause and effect is the actual interesting part, and the guy who plays the Mark Wahlberg character, I can't remember his name right now, but he actually did he come up to Calgary in October 2017, and he was on a speaking engagement where he tried to explain to them that the industry and the government that they didn't Canada was actually in a worse position than the U.S. was because of our economic slowdown. By the time we returned to activity, the push for profits was going to push safety out the window, and that's why we're at the point where our safety is administrative. It's not actual safety, because they look at actual safety as costing time and money. So now we're back to building the system. We've got the system built. That night, we're actually going out to do a test on a Birchcliff rig after being on this Birchcliff safety meeting. It's an industry-wide safety meeting. So we talked to their lead safety end, and we will afterwards. He understands the test is going to go on, so they decide to hold us up a little bit. So I get a call from the consultant, says, "Well, Tim," he said, they're cleaning the rig and they're making sure everything's in perfect shape because they know you're going to be taking a video." So we go out there. We show up 5 hours later. So to clean the rig and put this in time, they're looking at about $2,500 an hour in static cost. When the rig's not doing anything, they take 5 hours to clean the rig. So, you can do the math, 5 times 25, $12,500, blowing out the window just to make sure that the video. So, sometimes what they look at as costs in real time and costs and just what they get away with are two different things. We get out there, we take the video. The video goes smooth. The test is done in 4 hours. Right? It was also the beta test on the truck. The first time the truck had been operated since it had been rebuilt to do this test. So we get finished and we start going along. We start marketing it, and things start to pick up a little bit. Well, we get called in that spring. As I got on to the last video about how the Comply Works, how we get a call from the regulatory agency, or a call from one of our field guys at the regulatory agency had been out there and threatened them, and decided they wanted us to use somebody else. Before that happens, I get a phone call from the largest company in my area in the pressure testing market, and he calls me up and he says, "Tim, I helped this company when I was little. I worked for him, and he says we have an issue with this company using predictive software. Can we have a meeting and talk about it?" So their salesperson comes up, who was there when I was there. So we're talking, and he says, "Can you help me?" Well, one of the reasons I helped, like I said, we went over earlier, I had written letters in other instances of companies not getting paid and having to fight for their rights to the industry, and so I had a way of going over above them. Plus, they had a full copy of the field service management system, the operating and business plans when I worked for them. That they were going to be one of the sponsor companies. They come from this company coming to you and having an issue is kind of worrisome, because they have they're a very prominent family in the oil and gas industry, so they have a lot of connections. So I thought this was kind of curious, but the company that they were dealing with, that had come in as their rival, had been a rivalry that that had gone on from Calgary and worked its way finally to the north with these two companies. The one I'd met, he'd actually hired the other company when I worked for him. One of the founders of this company was using this predictive software. I'd met him when he was a consultant, and I went up and did a test for him, and we sat down and we were talking, and he explained to me where they came from and how they came about, and they were a group of consultants. The way they operate it is they work on they run it as a business. They can do any type of service they want. We had an example of that way back from let's say 2000 and the 2000s, beginning of the 2000s, which drove price and drove the economic situation to the point where when I got involved, I was writing a letter to an oil company called oil&gas. Had one of their vice presidents had got discouraged by what they called gouging, which is something that oil&gas is famous for doing, gouging the services. But in this case, the services are gouging back in their opinion. So he wrote an op-ed to the newspaper, and the newspaper published it. And then at the same time, we had an issue with it. So I wrote a letter to their governance board citing this op-ed and said, how would you like to publish the truth, and we'll see what happens to you. So they decided to pay my client in that respect, and in that argument, my client to this day, or my ex-client to this day, works almost primarily for them. So it worked out well for them. So they were hoping we could come up with some sort of a situation where maybe another letter would work and would keep them safe. Well, I knew if I took on the challenge that it was going to cost me. Don't get me wrong, I've taken on these challenges before, and the problem with being the messenger, when you're the messenger, no matter where you go in the world, they always want to kill the messenger. So if you're going to be the messenger, understand that it's going to cost you a lot to be the messenger. So we decided, okay, as soon as the effect of this predictive software started to affect me, as soon as the regulatory body had threatened one of my people, I went to my politicians, being my MLA and eventually my MP, started providing them information and the situation. We started with the initial situation, what caused it, and the MLA is not a member of the legislation assembly, is what that stands for you Americans. It's like your state representative for your area. My MLA, he's not a bad guy, he's a nice guy. We tried to give him the information as much as we can. Hopefully he could pick it up. It's a steep learning curve, and it's like anybody else. They're taught to advocate and obfuscate. Get along and go along to get along, especially when they view themselves as a government in waiting, which they probably are. They were previously the government, and now as the government in waiting, that gives them two problems. If they pick up on any of these issues, they're gonna say, "Well, hold on a second. We're a government for 16 years. We didn't do anything about this." Which we'll get into why. I mean, didn't matter if you were government for 16 years, the government before you, the government exists. They all collude to do the exact same thing. Just depends on whose pocket's getting filled. So now we're not getting a whole lot of satisfaction through them. So we're trying to feed them some more information, try to get them into what the field service management and how the psyche of the industry actually works. Rather than, he did work a little bit in the industry, but on a field level. So we're trying to get him into how the psyche of the industry actually works. So he might say, well, I would understand that. And he might understand some of it, but if he said that, then he would be complicit, wouldn't he? So he's not going to ever say, he's not going to say that. So he's learning through his learning curve, and he's had about almost a year and a half of us feeding him information. So he's actually situated perfectly for taking over, in the next election cycle, taking over as the oil and gas, minister most likely, which is good for him. Now, as long as he affects the changes, that's even better. It's better for us. Before he gets there, that's provincial. So that's, it could be a year or 2 years down the road yet before we get to that point. So we're looking at federal right now with our federal election coming up. So that's one of the reasons we went to the PM, that's Prime Minister, is we tried to get the Prime Minister's attention. When we noticed that all of a sudden we had this predictive software going on, we identified the predictive software, as had the competition when they came to us, that this was just a way to cheat and try to get away with it. This was an extreme hazard. If the hazards are rated on scales of 1 to 4, right, or 1 to 16, depending on 4 being the lowest and 16 being the highest, or 1 being the lowest and 4 being the highest. This is a 4. You can't get any higher, right? I mean, this is imminent danger. You know something's going to happen. You set it up for something to happen, and what you're setting up today is going to have a continual effect for a long period of time before it's modified or changed out. Which means, so to put that in plain terms, people are going to die. The equipment's going to get wrecked, and the environment's going to suffer. So the industry will abdicate, obfuscate, and they'll bloviate like crazy, right? And they'll put their talking heads out there, and they'll all be, we don't know how that happens. We're working on it, and the same stuff. The politicians follow suit, and the people go, oh yes. Why? Because the people are busy trying to get along to go along to get along. Again. So when we go to them, so we wrote the letter in May, so May 23rd. I said, okay, we'll write a letter. So we wrote a letter and we tried to explain it. And write the letter. It says if we carry on, people are going to die and somebody's going to go to jail. And that's kind of stopped. And we didn't get it. We're not kidding with the letter. So we put a letter in there. We explain the situation with predictive software, how predictive software is just an invitation to spin charts, an indication at a time when you don't have a lot of experience in the industry. Instead of training people properly and have an opportunity to do it right, what you're doing instead is you're encouraging cheating. Now, it doesn't just happen, say, on the pressure testing side itself. When you're testing equipment, or you're testing services, you're testing manufacturing structures or manufacturing systems. What ends up happening is as you cheat here, that transcends all the way down. So that teaches the people below you, right, or through that whole process, to go ahead and don't maintain this, or don't do this, or don't do that. And then pretty soon, when they're forced to maintain it, or fix their behavior, that becomes a big issue. And then the issue becomes a fight. The fight becomes a confrontation. The confrontation becomes a lot of hurt feelings. Right? And, just something that everybody wants to avoid. It would all be avoided in the first place if everybody was taught properly in the first place. There's no need for all these things because everybody automatically works together and everything, we have an issue, let's fix the issue. Let's actually do it. That would be called real safety, but that's called real time, right? What we do is we write up nice little reports, and we bloviate, we change them as the latest news articles coming out are telling people. So that's how it actually works in real time. So now we're going to get back to our letter. I keep getting off topic here, but the letter of the 23rd of May, 2018. So that letter again was based on explaining the relationship between the predictive software and spinning charts and how it works and how it was basically a giant big caution letter, right? Danger, caution. And at the end of it, we explained again who we are. About the field service management system, anchor communication, the different things we did, different things that are coming up, and we gave them a list of reference material that they could reference that they would have had at CAP, through the various organizations they belong to. Whether or not they cared, no. I mean, that's as my contact said. So it was pretty simple. Tim, they didn't even look at it. He said they took it, they handed it off. Well, safety stuff, handed it off to the to our executive in charge of our HSE program, Health, Safety, and Environment. Send it off to him. So he's going to look at it, and he's going to go, hold on a second, if that's Buddy Joe's, no, you know what? That's just garbage, throw it away. Especially when I got down to the field service management system, would have been a full stop. The conversation I'd had in December of 2017 with the safety personnel for Birchcliff, they understand about the field service management system, and again, that's when he explained to me that they have a weekly and a monthly meeting amongst the executive of the HSE divisions within the various oil and gas companies. So they've broken off into little groups, and every week those little groups have a meeting, and then the larger group, they're represented from each one of these little groups every month has another meeting. Now, that's a great idea. Perfect. If you want to control the entire industry, because you can guarantee the board of directors, they're trying to meet 2 or 3 times a year and make, get paid as much as they can. They're definitely not meeting all the time. These guys, are they getting paid to do this? Absolutely not. I mean, this is an initiative they take on their own. I mean, kudos, great on them. And if we can just get them steered in the right direction, we could actually get some real functionality in those meetings. But unfortunately, they're dealing with the situation where nobody wants to spend the money. Right? Nobody wants to spend the time. They want liability. Save money, right? Make money, and just remove our liabilities. So I mean, they're not, it's not that they're bad people. They're just stuck between a rock and a hard place. Yeah, there's not a lot of way out. I mean, if they don't go along to get along, what happens is they end up broke. Right? They end up having to fight my battle. So that letter didn't really go anywhere. I mean, we gave it time. We tried to go behind the scenes and see if we could get people to try to push it a little bit, and some people tried. So as soon as we come out with that letter, we noticed a lot of our work started to slow down. I mean, the industry was slowing down. It was going through a cycle again. So by the time we got into 2018, early January 2018, I started getting phone calls from some guys I've known a long time, and I've worked with them for a long time. They're decent, honest human beings. They want to do the right thing all the time, but again, they've gone through a beating. They're at a point where they got families to feed. So they phoned me up and said, "Tim, we're sorry, we can't. You're rocking the boat too much. Right? We got to let you. We got to look after our families." I said, "No, that's fine. Don't worry." I said, "I'm good. I'm good. I'll survive." I said, "I'm not giving it up." I said, "But I'll survive." So we get into the October letter, but by October of 2018, we're starting to cook. I'm a little annoyed at people, so I write a 17 or 18 page letter off to them. Up to the industry this time, I directed entirely, rather than just going through the governance board. This time we directed right to all 637 members of the oil and gas officers and directors. And we let that percolate a little bit. We get a response. We actually put a demand in there for we give them an opportunity to challenge any of our assumptions, any of our ownership ownership of the intellectual property. Nobody challenges it, right? They're not going to challenge it. They're going to run. The idea is that we shut up and don't say anything. Maybe it'll go away. Well, I don't go away too good. So I get a phone call from my bank, and my bank calls me in after this letter goes out, and I'm meeting with my business manager in the bank, and the business manager says, I always give them a copy of all these letters. The interesting part is that Scotiabank sits on the board of Birchcliff. Birchcliff has been tied into a lot of the stuff. Birchcliff got this information back from day one. Them in Canada got the stuff ahead of everybody else. So it's becoming quite the interesting phenomenon. I was also going to get a phone call from Birchcliff. Birchcliff says, or not Birchcliff, but from Scotiabank. Yeah, you need to come on in and have a meeting. So I come in and have a meeting, and during the meeting, the meeting was kind of a bit of an attack, and it says, "How dare you go after these innocent people?" referring to the officers and directors. And I said, "Innocent? Do you know any of these people?" "No." I said, "Do you know anything about any of these people?" "No." I said, "Do you know if they're, maybe they're good people, maybe they're not good people? I mean, I can't tell you who they are, who they aren't." I said, "I can tell you what I know publicly about a lot of these people, and what I know from some, from some of the people that I've met." I said, "Well, we'll take a guy like Frank McKenna, for instance." I said, "Did you know that he was the shoe-in for the head of the Liberal Party when Trudeau was running for it? He was a 2-3 favor, and all of a sudden he just up and disappears one day. He just quits, throws his weight on the last ballot behind Trudeau. Trudeau becomes our now PM, becomes the leader of the Liberals. Mr. McKenna ends up, lo and behold, his life is great now. I mean, he's the chairman of the board for TD Bank. He's sitting on he sits on the board for CNRL, Canadian Natural Resources. He was on Notley's pipeline boards. I mean, his life's great. Guess who happened to be one of the major investors in those companies that we just mentioned? A guy by the name of George Soros. Now, we've all seen pictures, that tie Soros together with Trudeau, right? Are you starting to see anything, but it's just a coincidence, right? Coincidence happen. It's a coincidence. There's another coincidence for you. Just, so I'd like to get off subject a little bit. There's another coincidence for you. During the 2008 crash, right? 2007, 2008, 2009, when the housing market bubble burst, it was also the first time that the Speaker of the House in the United States had elected a female speaker. Her name was Nancy Pelosi. Now, in Canada, and of course, at the same time, we had the AIG insurance bailout because they were about to collapse. That involved, if memory serves me right, that involved another company. I think it was Manulife that they had some relationship went on with Manulife. And I know that a lot of money got transferred to Manulife if they bought them out or whatever they did. That was all done early 2009. That was done with the quantitative easing money and the bailout packages. Well, the head of the Manulife in Canada was a guy by the name of Dominic D'Alessandro. Dominic D'Alessandro is an Italian. He came all the way over from from Italy and went through McGill University and became a lawyer, and he's had his life is his life. The interesting part about that is that shortly after that, the AIG and the Manulife incident, the Alessandro himself was replaced by a vice president, and he reappeared as the head of Suncor Energy. Suncor being Canada's largest oil and gas company. So that was that's you might say it's coincidental, but what's really coincidental is the fact that Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, her maiden name is D'Alessandro. When you have D'Alessandro must be a popular name, must be like Smith, though, Smith in Italian. But I'm part Italian. I don't know. I think it's just a coincidence. A lot of things are coincidental, and then you start looking at who the shareholders again are. You come back to another gentleman by the name of George Soros. So when there's a lot of coincidences going on, and as we go through, you're going to find more and more coincidences over and over again. Here's a coincidence for you. Shortly after my bank communication, it was almost like I was being recorded in the bank. I believe I was, because on the way out the door, we had a little conversation, myself and the bank manager, that was kind of off the record. So, we'll fast forward to, that was back in October of 2018. And by January 2018, I started losing more of my 2019, I started losing a lot of my services, or a lot of my contracts. So that's fine. I mean, the lawsuit came about where, all of a sudden we're dealing with the CRA. And I'm asking the CRA to, send us some proof. Send us some evidence. What are you talking about? I mean, all of a sudden you have a demand. If you have a demand, at some point there should have been something that went with the demand. So this is how we ended up with the lawsuit, is when they didn't send us any information. Instead, what they sent is they sent a demand to my bank for my bank to guarantee the account. Right? Well, that effectively shut the bank down. And here's the problem with shutting the bank down. So what the bank did is, the bank, by shutting down the account, the two things happened. First of all, the demand was illegal. The CRA, whether it's the CRA, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's a person or a government official, doesn't matter. For them to get a seizure notice on you or garnishee, they have to go and they have to run that through the court system. Same thing as I did with the lawsuit. Same thing that I have to do if I want to seize a federal building for failure to pay. Let's say, I have to go and I have to prove to the judge that I have a case. The judge says you have a case. The judge gives you a file number and a court registry. That's that's the proper procedure. And I'll tell you, 3 times I've seen this done 3 different ways. That people don't understand that sometimes when they get these seizure notices, these guarantees are totally legal. So this hits the bank. The bank pulls, I get a letter, a copy from the CRA that they had sent a copy to the bank. The bank quickly pulls my bank account, that account. So they pull the business account. I said, well, thank you very much. I said, where's the court registry number? Where's the file? What jurisdiction is this taking on? Well, it isn't. So if you're not taking on, so I phoned the CRA and I asked those questions. And we don't have to. I said, well, actually, you do have to. Right? There's so much precedence where the CRA gets themselves in trouble. That's why whenever they go to court, they've never won a court case. They never will win a court case because they continue to break the law. They're no different than the rest of us. So now what I've done is I finally got a letter back. So everybody wants to call you all the time, right? Don't answer their calls. You don't know them. Don't answer them. Just wait for them to send you a letter. When they send you a letter, now they've identified somebody with whom you can send information back to. So now I have a law firm and a name that I can finally send the information back to. So it's really simple. What the bank did, by taking that, is they instituted themselves on a fraud. But by taking it, it's called theft by conveyance, right? They should have never touched it. I was their client. They should have responded on behalf of me, not on behalf of Revenue Canada. So by not doing so, they didn't look after the fiduciary duties of looking after their client. They looked after the duties of Revenue Canada. That's because banks and the people that run them are, they just want to go along to get along. right? They're just cowards. They abdicate and obfuscate constantly. So here's another example. With mine, I'm not worried about it because that would set up another lawsuit. That's what I've been waiting for. Now I'm going to sue them again. Again, I'm going to use small claims court because it just annoys the piss out of these big corporations, and that's what's so great about it. So I mean, and either way, we're dealing with small amounts anyhow. So it's more to set things up and knock them down. It's like the PMOs. I won that. Now, okay, bank, explain to us exactly how, right, or why you didn't follow through or even talk to your client. You just went ahead and did what you thought was protecting the bank. I'm your client. You do what's protecting me. So the next thing that happened is we had another one. A friend of mine will probably be watching this, be annoyed, but I won't say his name. So really, what happened? But he was going through a personal situation, and he was dealing with lawyers, back and forth. One lawyer sent his bank a demand for a garnishee or seizure. So they went ahead and they automatically demanded. Did what the lawyer's demand had asked for. It looked official. It looked like a court registry document. It was an official looking document when all was said and done. So we were meeting that weekend. I was down in Vancouver. We were meeting that weekend, and a whole bunch of us, and he comes in, and I said, well, the CRA did that to me, because this isn't the first time, but this is the second time CRA's done this to me. I said, the CRA did this to me. I said, and it turned out that their demand was false. It was fraud. I said, so what court registry did you take it on? What's the file number? Well, the bank wouldn't tell me that stuff, as the bank has to. I said, they can't just take your stuff and quote that they're doing it without showing you stuff. So he went in and he got fighting with the bank. While he was fighting with the bank turned around and it's simple. I said, you're in BC. I said, there's only so many registries. I said, phone them all. So I actually come up with that idea himself. He phoned them all. Found out there's no court registry, nothing. Phoned back to his lawyers. The lawyer freaked because now he's in a position where his lawyer committed a massive fraud, and they can get, this is a debarrable offense, which means you're no longer a lawyer. He didn't go through that point. I mean, they quickly, the terms and conditions which he was fighting with this other person over were quickly redecided in his favor, and everybody signed off and said goodbye so that the lawyer could protect their integrity. They didn't have a whole lot, but they could protect it. So that was that was another bank. That was a TD bank, actually. So then we had another one with the Bank of Montreal. We had the Bank of Montreal going into an account. So for a personal debt, they went into a corporate account that had multiple shareholders, and they took out the money from a corporate account for personal debt. Again, they tried to bluster it or tried to produce fraudulent documentation and said, okay, this is why we did it, so that the rest of the shareholders and the rest of the directors would say, oh, okay, this looked legal, but it wasn't legal. So the bank ended up having to eat $250,000. They didn't like it, but guess what? It's better than going to jail, right? So banks will do that. The unfortunate part with this situation I'm in, I just got the letter today. I'm trying to get out of here right now because I have to go help a friend of mine. So we're going to get this done. Next week I'll get on that, address it. It'll take me a couple of days to write some letters and set up get the small claims action going. We'll send that back. That's how we responded, and then then the fireworks will start, and they won't know exactly what to do. They're not used to it when you come over the top. The idea is that they want you to be scared and run. Don't run. Don't get scared. Right? Just stand up. And what are they going to take? So they take your house, right? You know what? Oh well. I mean, I've been known to give away 3 of them anyhow. So it's houses are houses. You'll get another one. Things come around, they go around. But what we're at today, we'll see what happens. Stuff is stuff. I mean, the world's changing, and we'll see how these banks respond. But that's where we're at now. We're at a situation where it doesn't matter if it's the oil and gas industry or if it's the banking industry or if it's the government. They're colluding. It's their collusion and their corruption. And because they continue to collude and corrupt, we as individuals have lost all our rights. Unless you stand up and you say, you know what, I don't give a shit, I'm going to fight you. Right? And you don't need, it's not a matter of outsmarting them. right? I mean, in Canada, we limit the number of people they accept to the bar, the number of lawyers. The reason they limit the number of lawyers is so that we don't have ambulance chasers, so that you as a citizen don't have the ability to fight or have your own rights. So I mean, that's allowed. Who maintains that? As soon as you elect an official, right? If he doesn't do things to fight for you and say, okay, hold on a second, let's free up how many lawyers we have. Let's get some of these ambulance chasers, because again, we have the same position. We all know about hiring the shitty lawyer. You still got to pay the guy, right? That's because the lawyers the cream doesn't come to the top, right? I mean, we have a saying in the oil and gas industry, and we're saying in a lot of other industries, but generally the people that get ahead, you can figure out the rest. They've been on their knees. But you know what? They get ahead by giving. And you can, if you understand that part, that's why the cream never runs to the top, right? We're so busy about cronyism and nepotism, protecting ourselves when we come in a position of power, and we surround ourselves with yes men so that that we're protected. We create our own little cliques, and those cliques we all do it. I mean, to a point. But if you have accountability and transparency, what happens is you don't do that. You can't do it, right? Because as you try to do it, it becomes obvious, and that you're basically reporting on yourself. So we have to get back to that. Our politicians have to get back to that. When Trudeau come in, we're going to be transparent. Well, what happened to transparency? Right? This is the most secret government in the government history of Canada. Why? Because you quickly learned that if you're transparent, you have to actually explain what you're doing. And you can't always explain that, hey, I'm looking after Mr. Soros' best interest right now. We're going to sell everything we can, give everything we can to the UN, because the UN, we like their ideas better than that, and we don't, I don't want to actually have to work. We'll see what happens. Anyhow, you guys have a good day. I kind of got off in the weeds there quite a bit. But you know what? Hopefully you learned something from this video, and we'll get back to something here a little different. And I mean, next time we'll find some other topic, whatever hits me in that day. We'll talk to you later. Bye.